In this module, we're going to spend some time and talk about professionalism in the culinary industry. The objectives for this module include: name key historical figures responsible for developing food service professionalism and describe the contributions for each. List and describe the key stages in development of the modern food service industry. Explain the organization of classic and modern kitchen brigades. Identify the attributes a student needs to develop a successful culinary career. Describe the importance of professional ethics for chefs. And list the specific behaviors that all culinary professionals should follow. So let's start our examination of a culinary timeline. In the 1500s, culinary guilds were developed to dictate and monopolize the preparation of certain food items. Each guild governed the production of a set of specific types of food. Rôtisseurs were in charge of the main cuts of meat, such as beef and pork. Pâtissiers were in charge of poultry, pies, and tarts. Poultry? Yes, poultry. Pigeon pies. Timisiers were in charge of breads. Vinaigrettes were in charge of sauces and stews. Trotteurs, ragouts. The term trotter is referred off of this, referring to the lower leg of a pig. Porte-chefs were the caterers. The first quote-unquote restaurant was formed in 1765. Prior to this, there were restaurants, but mostly were taverns. Monseigneur Boulanger opened the first freestanding restaurant in Paris. Boulanger's contribution to the food service industry was to serve a variety of foods prepared on premises to customers whose primary interest was dining. Prior to this, their primary interest was more in taverns and beers. Most people dined in either communal dining halls or families' environments, kitchens with their homes, or in taverns where the food was not necessarily the focus of the visit and typically was not very good. During the French Revolution of 1789 to 1799, there was a huge social structure change in France. Two of the most essential elements of French cuisine, bread and salt, were at the heart of the conflict. Bread, in particular, was tied up with the national identity. Bread was considered a public service necessary to keep the people from rioting. Bakers, therefore, were public servants, so the police controlled all aspects of bread production. If bread seems a trifling reason to riot, consider that it was far more than something to sop up bouillabaisse for nearly everyone but the aristocracy. It was the main component of the working Frenchman's diet. According to Sylvia Neely, A Concise History of French Revolution, the 18th century worker spent half his day wage on bread. But when the grain crops failed 2 years in a row, in 1778 and 1779, the price of bread shot up 88% of his wages. Many blamed the ruling class for the resulting famine and economic upheaval. On top of that, peasants resented the Gabrielle, a tax on salt that was particularly unfairly applied to the poor. Obviously, the causes of the revolution are far more complicated than the price of bread or unfair taxes on salt, just as the American Revolution was about more than tea tariffs. But both contributed to the rising anger toward the monarchy. The aristocracy, guilds, and their monopolies were abolished during this time frame. And a nascent restaurant industry emerged as well. Chefs could cater to a growing middle class during this time, and this is really when we started seeing the advent of the restaurant growing at this point after the revolution.
If there's an enduring image of the French aristocracy in the English-speaking world, it's probably of a woman in a frilly dress and about 2 feet of hair piled on her head, addressing the question of her subjects being too poor to buy bread with an oblivious, "let them eat cake." That woman was Marie Antoinette, who was the Queen of France during the French Revolution. But while her dress was indeed frilly and her hair was indeed tall, could she really have said something so clueless? The evidence suggests that she didn't. How do we know? Oh, there are lots of reasons. Starting with the fact that in French, the quote isn't even about cake. It's about brioche. Qu'il mange de la brioche. Brioche is delicious. It's a rich, buttery bread and it has strong associations with decadence. But if you ever try to serve a big loaf of brioche to the guests at a child's birthday party, you'll find out real quick that it is not, in fact, cake. But either way, the point of the quote is that this out-of-touch aristocrat didn't understand the realities of life as a peasant. So maybe that's a semantic quibble. The real evidence against Marie Antoinette having uttered this famous phrase is that, well, it was around long before she was. Scholars of folklore have found versions of the same quote, with some variations, across Europe. In 16th century Germany, there was a story of a noblewoman wondering why the hungry peasants didn't eat crosum, a kind of sweetbread. There's no evidence that Marie Antoinette ever said, "let them eat cake." But we do know people have been attributing the phrase "qu'il mange de la brioche" to her for nearly 200 years, and debunking it for just as long. The first time the quote was connected to Antoinette in print was in 1843. A French writer named Jean-Baptiste Alphonse Karr reported finding the quote in a book from 1760, when Marie Antoinette was just 5 years old. He hoped this would end the rumor that she was responsible for the famous phrase once and for all. Sorry about that, Jean-Baptiste. We're trying.
Marie-Antoine Carême was known as the Cook of Kings and the King of Cooks. His stated goal to achieve lightness, grace, order, and perspicuity in the preparation and presentation of food. As a saucier, he standardized the use of roux and devised a system to classify sauces. As a garde-manger, he popularized cold cuisine. As a culinary professional, he designed kitchen tools and equipment and uniforms that we still use today. As an author, he wrote and illustrated important texts on culinary arts. This was the beginning of La Grande Cuisine in the early 19th century. Arguably one of the most influential persons in culinary history is Auguste Escoffier. He was known as the Emperor of the World's Kitchens. He defined French cuisine and dining during the La Belle Époque, which is the beautiful epoch, a period of time between the Franco-Prussian War and the outbreak of World War I. He simplified food preparation and dining. He classified the 5 families of mother sauces used today in the classic cooking. He wrote Le Livre des Menus, a guide to planning menus or meals. Ma Cuisine, a survey of cuisine bourgeois or middle class. Le Guide Culinaire, still in use today, a collection of classic cuisine recipes and garnishes. This was actually one of my personal favorite cookbooks. Escoffier also brought us what we know of today as the Kitchen Brigade. The Kitchen Brigade is a system of staffing a kitchen called the back of the house so that each worker is assigned a set of specific tasks. The classic Kitchen Brigade created by Escoffier consisted of the chef de cuisine, sous-chef, aboyer or expediter, chefs de partie or station chefs, and commis or cooks or assistant cooks. The modern Kitchen Brigade consists of the executive chef, sous-chef, area chefs, line cook, pastry chef, apprentice, short order cook, and various different other cooks and chefs that would be assigned to various different tasks.
I mean, I hear you ask, how important is Escoffier? And the thing is, like, how important is Escoffier? At the end of the day, like, Escoffier was everything. I mean, I used to work with this guy at Ducasse who had the cover of Le Repertoire de Cuisine, Escoffier's classic book, tattooed on his entire back. That's how important Escoffier is.
He came, he saw, he cooked. His name was Auguste Escoffier, and like many revolutionaries, his goal was modest. He just wanted to completely change the way we eat.
Escoffier was a revolutionary in that he democratized access to French cuisine. It was a very medieval, guild-like atmosphere. And Escoffier says, no, I'm going to write it all down. And by writing it all down, I can make it accessible to anyone. That was a revolutionary idea that changed cooking around the world.
Auguste would say to his employees, make it simple, make it simple, make it simple. My name is Michel Escoffier, and I'm a great-grandson of a famous chef who is regarded today as the father of modern cooking.
Inspiring future chefs and future tattoos, Escoffier codifies the cuisine, giving detailed step-by-step instructions.
Where you have your grandmother saying, oh, I just put a pinch of this and a pinch of that, Escoffier was the one who go, it's a quarter teaspoon.
And he wanted to introduce scientific principles into the cuisine. And one of those key principles, if you like, is the idea that these things can be expressed as a set of laws and rules and set down in a book, so that the dish you can make today, you can make exactly the same dish again tomorrow.
The Guide Culinaire, which Auguste Escoffier published in 1903, is really, even today, the Bible to every great chef.
Escoffier was the first one to just canonize everything and to put down on paper everything that there was in cooking. Before him, there were no recipes. And after him, the entire restaurant business began. All of a sudden, people like me started frying octopus legs because of Escoffier.
Now that chefs have a manual on how to cook, Escoffier organizes a way to cook these recipes on a massive scale by implementing the brigade system, an army-like reorganization of the kitchen staff.
If I work for Escoffier, I've got one thing that is regularity. I know my place and I know what I'm doing.
He will appoint chefs that will be responsible for particular types of food. They will have sous chefs, and the sous chefs will have assistants, and each person reports to the person above them. I think it's all for the better. It's great.
Today, the kitchen. Tomorrow, the world.
During the same time of classic cuisine, or cuisine classique, we have Charles Ranhofer. He was the first internationally renowned chef of an American restaurant, Delmonico's in New York City. Published the Epicurean, which contains 3,500 recipes and is still in use today. Delmonico's was founded in 1827 in New York City and moved to several places before settling at 2 South William Street in its iconic building. In 1862, the restaurant hired French chef Charles Ranhofer, who remained the chef from 1862 to 1876, and again from 1879 to 1896, just 3 years before his death in 1899 at the age of 62. Delmonico's still exists today in the same William Street iconic location. The early 1900s and mid-1900s gave us Ferdinand Point and Nouvelle Cuisine. This was typified by lighter foods and a simplification of techniques. Chef Point refined and modernized the classic cuisine of Escoffier, and he laid the groundwork for Nouvelle Cuisine, or New Cuisine as it's referred. His book, Ma Gastronomie, was first published posthumously in French in 1969, and the book includes 200 recipes based on Point's notes. He inspired and trained influential chefs such as Paul Bocuse, Jean and Pierre Trogois, Charles Trotter, Alain Duchapel, and among others. Gaston Lenotre is the father of modern French pastry. He became a culinary school, or created a culinary school, L'école Lenotre. He developed innovations in Bavarians, charlottes, and mousses. He mastered techniques of freezing baked products, which at that time had been unheard of, simply just going bad or just doing less of them. He's known as the possible creator of the famed opera cake, or gâteau opera, as seen here. The late 20th and early 21st century gave us the American culinary revolution. Consumers and chefs seek bold ethnic cuisines inspired by the arrival of diverse immigrant groups, particularly those from Asia and Latin American cuisines. Since the 1960s, the United States has created and influenced the cuisine of the world, just as it had been influenced for many years prior. California cuisine, or New American cuisine, was launched in early 1970s by famed chef Alice Waters. And this was done in Chez Panisse in Berkeley, California. Alice Waters had her goal to serve fresh, seasonal, and locally grown produce in simple preparations that prepared and emphasized the food's natural flavors. Chez Panisse, established in 1971, is considered to be one of the most influential dining establishments in the United States. This was the public venue in which Waters would put her culinary ideals into practice, using fresh, local, and seasonal ingredients. The restaurant established working relationships with local farmers and suppliers in order to do so, and it was launched a career of many notable chefs, including Jeremy Tower and Paul Bertoli. This was really the beginnings of what we see of as the farm-to-table movement today. Previously, I'd mentioned Jeremy Tower, and Jeremy Tower worked for Alice Waters for several years, and many people refer to him as the actual workhorse behind Chez Panisse. He left Chez Panisse in 1977 and began his own career. Tower has criticized Waters for taking most, if not all, the praise and credit for the acclaim of Chez Panisse, as well as the primary leadership in the new California cuisine movement in the American culinary revolution. He also questions Waters' role as an actual chef in the kitchen, implying that she has not cooked in years. There is also her role in the restaurant altogether. He wrote California Dish, What I Saw and Cooked at the American Culinary Revolution in 2003. Fusion cuisine, which is the blending of different cultures in their cuisines, has been around for as long as there has been food that has traveled from country to country. However, recently, American cuisine has been influenced by the cuisines of other cultures as well. This is most evident in the fusion cuisine, which began its firmament in the 1980s. In fusion cuisine, ingredients or preparation methods associated with one ethnic or regional cuisine are combined with those of another.
Peanut butter and jelly, tomato and basil.
You can't have one without the other.
But Indian and Latin, or French and Mexican? I found some unusual fusion restaurants mixing just those flavors, starting with Epizote on the Upper East Side.
Castino, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Quick history lesson, the French occupied Mexico back in the 1800s, and they influenced their cuisine as a result.
We want something. We want techniques, how to cook, how to eat.
Today, Chef Agostino is mixing those French cooking techniques with traditional Mexican flavors. You can see the fusion when he makes his duck confit taquitos.
I use apples in cranberry compote, which is French technique. And I use cilantro, fresh onions, and of course, epazote.
Epazote is not only the name of the restaurant, it's also an old-fashioned herb used in Mexico.
Epazote is between the basil and mint. It has very unique flavor.
Back to the fusion. When Chef Agostino makes veal tacos, he braises the meat, which is a French technique, but uses Mexican beer, not wine.
Now this is one of their featured dishes. It looks like a standard goat cheese salad, but it's coated with chili, so it's shockingly spicy when you bite into it, and really delicious.
Paired with a truffle vinaigrette and a watermelon radish, the heat is balanced, and so are the French and Mexican ingredients.
Indian and Latin flavors are another unexpected combination, but that's exactly what they mix at the Vermilion restaurant.
It's not only spices, it's explosion of flavors.
Chef Anoop Patwal says Indian and Latin doesn't have to mean eye-watering spicy food, but he always packs in the flavor, like with his tandoori skirt steak.
In India, people don't eat beef, but over here we take the Argentinian cut of meat, which is churrasco. and we put Indian spices in it.
And in addition to the turf, they also have the surf with dishes like tamarind shrimp.
In India, tamarind is a very important sauce. It's basically a sweet and sour food.
Then there's the chipotle scallops mixed with Indian spices and served over a pumpkin puree. And they even fuse Indian and Latin flavors with their naan bread.
We can do garlic naan, ginger naan, cheese naan, spinach naan.
Next time you can't decide what type of food to eat, try a fusion restaurant and eat a few kinds of food together. You may be pleasantly surprised. Anna Gilligan, Fox 5 News.
The farm-to-table movement is one of the fastest growing and hottest trends in the culinary industry today. Although chefs look to incorporate global flavors and ingredients, they also seek locally grown foods. This promotes agriculture, it focuses on the food served in season, and it protects heirloom varieties or varieties not changed over time. A well-designed symbiosis between the restaurant and the farmer allows the seasonality of food to shine through. Many specialty farmers will work with chefs to plant specific crops and help with menu development. Modernist cuisine, also known as molecular gastronomy, is the study of chemistry and physics of food preparation. Ingredients or reinvents cooking using ingredients and machinery from food manufacturing. Liquids are solidified into spheres. They're turned into powders. One of the leaders of this is Ferran Adria. Ferran Adria is most famously known as the Salvador Dali of the kitchen. He's a Spanish chef trained in French Nouvelle Cuisine. He created it with advancing the culinary science movement. And he has small tasting plates of many of his 35 courses, engaged all the senses, including using fresh ingredients. Using equipment and ingredients more common in food manufacturing than in restaurants. In modern food service operations, new technologies have impacted the modern restaurant. Stoves replace fireplace cooking. Food storage, canning, and freezing expands availability. Transportation, train, and then air shipping frees chefs from seasonality and geographic locations. Today, new foods are available in most parts of the world. Food is now sourced globally as opposed to just locally. Hybridization and genetic modification means new varieties. Genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, may have unforeseen consequences. The problem with GMOs, and this is a controversial topic, is that GMOs typically refer to things that are done in a laboratory. We've been genetically modifying plants for eons of time, animals for eons of time, but we've done it through crossbreeding. It's when we inject the DNA of one into the DNA of another in a laboratory is when we run into unforeseen circumstances. They may be regulated pretty heavily and have been regulated and will be regulated pretty far in the future. Consumer concerns impacts the food industry and service industry today. Concerns about nutrition and diet, concerns about public safety, and consumer concerns, things such as government inspections, regulation of labeling, new interests in local and organically grown foods, concerns about sustainability. These are practices used to minimize human impact on the environment. They protect natural resources, they minimize food miles, and avoid pesticides and reduce packaging, and composing of scraps, and fair trade products. What does it take to be a professional chef? There's lots of different skill sets involved in that, but we boiled it down to just a few. Knowledge, lifelong learning. Skills, development with experience. Taste, judgment, dedication, professional ethics, and pride. The American Culinary Federation says it best. The Culinarian's Code says, as a proud member of the American Culinary Federation, I pledge to share my professional knowledge and skill with all culinarians. I will place honor, fairness, cooperation, and consideration first when dealing with my colleagues. I will keep all comments professional and respectful when dealing with my colleagues. I will protect all members from the use of unfair means, unnecessary risks, and unethical behavior when used against them for another personal gain. I will support the success, growth, and future of my colleagues and this great federation. As you can see, the career paths in the culinary industry are vast and limitless. From being a chef owner of a restaurant or executive chef or pastry chef, you can do recipe testing and cookbook authoring. You can own a bake shop or a catering company. You can be a food stylist for a magazine. You can write for food media. You can even be a food technologist. So the list goes on and on and on. If you enjoy writing, then food blogging and food writer may be something you want to do. If you really don't want to work in restaurants but like cooking, maybe you might want to look into being a personal or a private chef. And maybe you want to work with soil or dirt and you want to be a farmer. So let's summarize and talk about some of the takeaways for today. Auguste Escoffier is arguably one of the most important culinary figures throughout history. The modern brigade system for kitchen is more adaptable for various restaurants and food service operations today. We're currently in the third epoch of culinary revolutions in the United States, the first being Nouvelle, second California, and the third as yet unnamed movement currently happening consisting of fusion, farm to table, etc. Fusion cuisine has been around since the first foreigner set foot on foreign soil. Currently, it is experiencing a renaissance. The culinary professional must meet the challenges of today with fervency and zeal. There are many paths to success in the culinary world that are not limited to just working in restaurants and kitchens.